Hello and welcome back to the Insights of NetSupport corporate podcast. I'm your host, Cauchi, and today I'm really excited to be welcoming Bernie onto the show. Hi, Bernie. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. Thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. How's your week been so far?
Really, really good. Thank you. Yeah, very
Yeah.
nice. It's been quite nice weather here. So I live in France, so it's actually been quite nice. It's been up to kind of 16 degrees and we've had sun.
Oh,
We've had
perfect.
that big burning ball in the sky for a little while. And I don't think it's been quite as good in the UK. So yeah, I'm feeling
No,
quite
it's a
smug.
bit
Feeling good.
colder. I have got
And
the
it's
sun
cold.
today, so yeah. Yeah, I've got the sun, but it's still cold. But I think it is meant to get a bit warmer this weekend, which I'm looking forward to.
Good stuff. So in answer to your question, had a great week. Thank you. And this is a really lovely
Brilliant.
week.
Oh, I'm so glad. So before we kind of get into our topic or anything today, would you mind starting by just introducing yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name's Andrew Bernard, but everyone calls me Bernie because, well, I asked them to. At school, all my mates were called stuff like Joey, Tony, Porky, Hursty, and Buzz, and they started calling me Bernie, and I really liked it. And funnily enough,
It suits you.
my first interview still gives me nightmares now. Straight out of college, I was about 21, I think. I went for an interview, and I met this guy, and he said, "Hello, my name's David Smith." I shook his hand, and I said, "Hello, my name's Andrew Bernard," and he said, "Sorry." I said, "My name's Andrew Bernard." "Sorry." And it took me 5 times to get him to get my name. And I was driving home, I had an awful interview. I was so unconfident. And I'm driving home, and I just thought, that was really bad. God, that guy, it took him 5 times to get my name. What an idiot. And then I realized it was my fault because I mumbled the name Andrew because I just don't like the way it sounds. It reminds me of getting told off by my mum as like a 12-year-old boy. I just thought, do you know what? I'm a grown-up. I can call myself what I like. So from now on, I ask everyone to call me Bernie. So that's me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm very much a cat, although I think my grandma still calls me Catherine, but that's fine. But otherwise, it sounds odd to me too.
That's your family name, isn't it? And I think we're all kind of caught between them. And I meet people, and I think, God, you're really not that person. You're a very different person. And I often say to young people, because I do a lot of work with young people, I talk to them about, I tell them my experience about having interviews because I think young people are really terrified about them anyway. I don't think anyone particularly likes them, but when you're starting out in your career, you don't really know who you are, where you fit into the world. And also, I kind of hear people going, Josh, or they kind of and they are about the name, and I tell them straight off, call yourself something you're happy with, because you're gonna have to say it a lot of the time. And if you start a conversation feeling less confident because you have to repeat yourself, then it's only going to go downhill from there unless there's something magnificent happens in the interview. So start strong, practice the name, Batman, rainbow, unicorn, cat, call yourself whatever you want, but be comfortable and absolutely own it. And absolutely own it. So should I tell you a bit about how I got to where I am now?
That would be great.
Very grand. I basically had a really terrible self-inflicted time at school. I went to a grammar school. When my mates, I didn't really like it. It was an all-boys school. And then in sixth form, I'd made some friends, got on okay. Got about, I think I got 10 GCSE O levels, and they're all absolutely middle band, B's and C's, didn't get anything outstanding. And all my friends went off to college, and my parents said, well, we think it'd be better if you stay at the grammar school. And I kind of went, well, watch me. It was almost like a switch flicked in my head, and I just thought, and that's where the wheels came off for me, and I got fully embedded without really necessarily thinking about it into the kind of culture of what we now call toxic masculinity, but I call kind of spaced masculinity. This idea that you've got to be the coolest, the hardest, the smartest, the one that gets thrown out of class more often, the one that's always first into fights. And that was combined with starting to go to football. I started to go to Arsenal home games. I grew up in Aylesbury, and so in order to go to football, you had to wear the right clothes, and I was on a job that paid me £8 a week part-time. So I started shoplifting. Me and 5 mates got arrested for trying to nick £1,000 off the clothes, was arrested for fighting, got suspended from school for going on holiday with my girlfriend during term time. And my dad was an ex-policeman. So basically everywhere I looked, I was creating this kind of toxic vortex around myself. And it was only when I got in a U at A level that I suddenly sat down, cried my eyes out for an hour and thought, who have I been for the last 2 years? And it was that kind of made me realize what on earth had I been doing. I've narrowed down all my options, ended up finding 2 places. I asked my mum for help, which was the first time I'd asked her for help for any length of time. To be completely honest, she didn't see anything after the way I behaved. So she helped me to kind of go through clearing in the Guardian, and I found 2 places that would offer me a place to do business and economics. And I ended up going to North East Wales Institute of Higher Education, which no one has ever heard of. Basically the only place that would have me just opposite the on the North Wales coast, in a town that had been pretty much killed off by the death of the steelworks. So it was a pretty grim 3 years, but I did okay. I eventually got a distinction in HND, and then went on to do a number of corporate jobs, starting at Unilever, Port Sunlight, where the first kind of soap factory was in the UK, and worked in universities in the end, and had a really good job at university in the Northwest. And then basically became so stressed because I hated work so much that my doctor signed me off sick for 3 months. And during that time, I kind of reevaluated my life, started talking about my feelings. Until that point, my wife's a counsellor. She'd been a counsellor for 20 years, well, 10 years at that point. She's now just retired as a counsellor for 30 years. I used to joke she never brought her ears home. That's not true. I just never used to speak about my feelings because I just had to get on with my work and focus. I'd been bullied a couple of times at different workplaces, and I just thought, you know what, I really need to do something different. And we went through some kind of coaching, and I realized then at that point that I needed to work with young people. And during that period, still using the laptop that I'd got from the university, I started my own business, and that's still running now. So that's Innovative Enterprise. And I started that now 18 years ago, and we worked with about 165,000 people since then in various different ways. So that's kind of that's the kind of condensed version of the last, I suppose, 40 years, really.
Yeah. Do you think you went back into really wanting to work with young people because of your experiences when you were a young person? Is that what kind of really brought about that passion?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, all sorts of young people love school. All sorts of young people don't feel it's for them. And I rebelled against all the opportunities I had. My parents moved to get me into the catchment area for the school I was in. In fact, I think that's probably what broke my parents' marriage up, because of the higher house prices and all that kind of stuff. And I just did not take to it at all. It did not fit me or the way I learned. And also that kind of machismo thing that comes out in grammar school boys and boys generally. But so I think I really wanted to help young people to see what it had taken me a really long time to see, which was, you can decide who you are and what you think about. You don't have to worry about what your friends are thinking about or what you're kind of being pushed to be like. You are allowed to be the person you want to be. And sometimes that means pushing back against your parents or helping them to understand you a little bit. But I think under it all, we've got skill. All of us have got skills that we don't necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis. We've got things in our private lives. We may be really good musicians, or we might write poetry, or we might make amazing videos, but we wouldn't put those on our CV as a young person because that's academic. So I think it's really time that we started to look at who the whole person is, what you like, what you don't like, how you fit into the world, how you see yourself fitting into the world. And there are millions of different types of jobs. Even if one of those doesn't fit, maybe you could start your own business. And I think starting your own business has been mystified, and it's made really complicated by programs. Like The Apprentice is like a horrible bully fest, and then you look at things like Shark Tank or what's it called, Dragon's Den, and they make it sound so mind-blowingly complicated. 20% of investment for a return of this. It really isn't. You need an idea, you need some passion, you basically need to register yourself as a business, you need to get on with it. And that's literally, and that's why I love people like Gary Vaynerchuk on Instagram. He's very sweary, but he's really, really massive on just get on with it. Every single one of us has got a tool we can start a business with in our pockets. Every single one of us. So part of my thinking about working with young people is to say, look, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, and it took a really long time until I worked it out. I don't want you to feel that it has to take that long to do it. I would like you to start thinking about who you are right now. Stop worrying about the outside influences and start focusing on who you are. And in fact, I've written a book called The Ladder to help teachers to help young people develop that. So there's a little plug for my book. It's on Crown House. It's called The Ladder. So that's why I really wanted to work with young people. That's a really long answer.
No, it's good though. I think it's really important to understand that. And part of with your experience at school, you mentioned there was that kind of toxic masculine culture. And as we're going to be talking a lot about masculinity today, could you start by saying about how this term can be quite misconstrued when we're looking at things like toxic side, obviously?
Yeah, I mean that's really one of the reasons I like to call it dominance-based masculinity, because it underpins all of our uncomfortable notions of what masculinity is. You know, that inability to compromise. You have to win. You have to be the strongest. You're not allowed to cry. You have to be decisive. You have to be on your own. You have to be stoic. You can't talk about your problems. And I think, yeah, you can learn a lot. You know, Ryan Holiday talks a lot about stoicism. And I think, yeah, you can learn a lot about it, but actually it shouldn't shut down your communications about your feelings. It should help you to manage them, but I don't think it should shut you down. And quite often with that strong silent type, or you know, men are allowed to express themselves in, well, there's not many emotions that men are allowed to kind of express. You know, I say allowed, we are allowed to do whatever we want, but I think that there's a lot of kind of
society
expectations. Yeah, we're not allowed to cry, we're not allowed to be weak, we're allowed to be raging, we're allowed to be angry, we're allowed to be take revenge, but we're not really supposed to compromise, and we're not really supposed to, you know, take on other people's feelings. It's my way or the highway, and all this kind of stuff. So I think like I say, I don't use toxic masculinity, and the reason I don't use it is because it quite often shuts people down. It's that kind of, well, not all men are like that, not all, you know, not all masculinities are toxic. Well, that's not actually what toxic masculinity says, but it's how what you say is very different sometimes from, and what you mean, how different people listen to it. And if you're already maybe dipped in the manosphere, dipped in the kind of ideas of kind of relationship coaches, and you know, there's obviously the Tate brothers, who are the tip of the iceberg of the manosphere, if you like. But there are loads of kind of guys talking about how that you need to be a high value man. A high, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything to them. It means you earn six figures, you've got a six pack, you're over 6 foot, because that's what women want. Well, they've kind of taken some studies and manipulated them to say that there are this many women and they're fighting for the top 10% of men. So they've created this extra top layer of what they define as alpha men, that only really other men seem to care about. And so their grift is trying to sell what this version of masculinity is. And I'm afraid that that's not very helpful to men generally. Like the patriarchy's not been particularly helpful for anybody who's under the kind of auspices of the people that actually have run the thing for years and years and years. The same is true of, you know, dominance-based toxic, or, you know, kind of alpha masculinity. It only really helps the people that purport themselves to be in that. It harms the rest of us.
Yeah, so and can you talk a little bit more about that? It's problematic.
Yeah, that's why I'm very keen to talk about it, because I think there are millions of young people that are listening to these versions of masculinity, and anyone who shows any consideration or kindness or empathy to anybody else is seen as weak or a wimp, or as they would have it, a simp. You know, someone who's overly sympathetic, doesn't have their own kind of feelings, are kind of suppressed by their views. And so I think it's again one of those divisions. It's either or, and I think there are so many different types of masculinities to think about, that to just say toxic masculinity shuts down debate, but also this kind of alpha or beta masculinity, that also is a divisive, polarizing thing. We're all different types of men, and I think to allow ourselves that ability to change is really, really vital. And if you think about it, masculinity and femininity are made up terms anyway, the same as things like
that's true.
Made up. So all of it's made up. It's just different levels of stuff that's been made up, and how different people push it towards, generally, I'm afraid, their own benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to kind of add one final thing that I've experienced and found and noticed, dominance-based masculinity, the really big problem with that is that every single place you look from those eyes, there's a fight. So there's a fight for dominance over your friends. There's a fight for dominance, and a lot of the manosphere kind of relationship coaches talk about. They don't call it this, but a lot of the things that they're putting across is about controlling somebody else, controlling someone in a relationship. So getting someone's password, not allowing her to have male friends, not allowing her to use social media without you having access to a pass. Because all of this stuff is like a controller's toolkit. So controlling your partner, fighting with authority, fighting with your parents if you're a young person, fighting with your university lecturers, or fighting with your teachers. Everywhere you look from a dominance-based masculinity perspective, you are trying to dominate everybody else. So that means you're in a constant state of kind of anger or stress or aggression, which again reinforces the need to be stronger, but actually it pushes you down a pathway that is very counterproductive, not only for you but also the people around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make
So
sense?
how can we, no, it does. So how can we look to tackle that dominance-based masculinity? Because like you said, it can be it's quite a damaging stereotype for everyone.
Yeah, and it's difficult, and I spend a lot of time online and in schools talking about dominance-based masculinity. I talk about feminism. I talk about antidotes to feminism's gone too far. There's a whole school of thought that says feminism's ruined everything. Well, has it really? And feminists and man haters? There's actually some really interesting research done, like a peer-reviewed piece of research in the universities, that even feminists don't really dislike men any more than most other women. They're just more willing to speak about the reasons they're upset about, men and masculinity and the patriarchy. And again, the patriarchy is not every man. It's the system in which we all live.
Yeah, exactly.
How can we tackle it? Well, whenever I hear feminism's gone too far, and I hear it in schools all the time, I hear things like women lie, women make up things, women want to destroy men, and this kind of stuff. So just one way of kind of dealing with it absolutely head on with some statistics is to say things like, okay, feminism's gone too far. Do you know what feminism is? Yeah, it's man hate. No. Do you know what the original aims of feminism are? It's the belief in the equality, politically, economic, and social equality of both sexes. Right. Okay. So by that notion, if feminism's gone too far, all of those things will be equal, right? Okay. So let's have a look at, let's say, for example, let's pick politics. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the UK House of Parliament. Across both houses, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, not the House of Lords and Ladies, the House of Lords, across both houses, 41% female and 69% male. Is that equal? Clearly not. Let's look at economics. Have you heard of the gender pay gap? Yeah, it's a myth. I've heard the Office for National Statistics.
I wish it was a myth.
Yeah, exactly. The ONS. I've heard it described as a feminist organization. So if you look at how it's compiled, the top 250 companies fill out a form. They don't make up their own stats and put them in. They fill a form out, what men are paid, what women are paid. And across the medium average income earnings across men and women, the gender pay gap is created. It's around 9.4% across all industries. Construction and finance are 22%. I think the gender pay gap is. Teaching really, really shocked me.
I was surprised with teaching as well when I looked into that.
Well, look at the proportion of teachers that are women, 75.5%. There's still a gender pay gap of 20.4%. So teaching, ironically, the place where we are helping to learn our future, teach our future generations, it's making it proportionally, the gender pay gap proportionally worse.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing. So that's the gender, that's economics, that's politics. if we look at society, I mean, quick question at 9 o'clock at night: who feels more safe walking around town? Secondly, what percentage of households do women make up do the most housework? Any idea?
Oh, I think I did know this, but I can't remember now. But I remember it was like really
UCL
high, because I know they
study,
did a lot of foundings during like COVID and stuff as well, didn't they?
Yeah, this was from a UCL study done in 2019. 93% of households, women, the majority of them, and most of them do 7 hours more than their male partners.
It's a huge difference.
Even where the woman is the main breadwinner, so she earns more than the man. 45% of households, in those households, women do the most housework. And that's just not cooking and cleaning. That's doing the emotional labor of have we filled out that form for the PTA? Have we got the kids' lunches booked? Where are we going on a holiday? Have we done this? Is the house insurance up to date? And those kind of things that, so I think to answer, that's a really long way of answering your question, but I think we need to answer it with facts. We need to answer it. We need to answer that question about toxic masculinity and, the patriarchy and all of that stuff. We all operate within a system that's built from the patriarchy. Law never intended for women to practice it. So things like law is really difficult for women to get into. There's a brilliant book called In Black and White by a black lawyer whose name escapes me. I've done a blog on it, which I'll link to afterwards. About all the issues that she had becoming a barrister in London as a from the UK. It's so complicated. It's so difficult, and made doubly harder by things like long hours culture, the macho culture that doesn't allow you to, we joke about the kind of lunches for wimps thing that came in, was it called Wall Street in 1980 or something? Michael Douglas says lunches for wimps. Well, that's corporate culture for you, isn't it? That's a kind of perfect indication of what corporate culture is. Always be at your desk. Lord Sugar's been railing against it since COVID, hasn't he? Get back to work. Note that his company is actually not putting out any dividends this year because all of his office space is becoming more. So I wonder why he was railing against people working at home. Anyway, there are so many reasons why we should all rebel against this macho culture that means that we should be there. We should be there. I mean, it's worse in America, obviously, because the holiday allowance is so much worse. The hours culture is so worse. I mean, but we're doing we're pushing ourselves quite a long way towards that in corporate UK. So I think that there's a number of issues that we need to deal with. So, and that masculinity, that machismo, does work its way through management structures, through cultures, through the way we view other people. We say, only doing a half day, that kind of joke, only doing a half day, when you're actually finishing on the time, those contracted hours. You finish 9 to 5, so I'll finish at 5:15, and you're seen as a lightweight because everyone's still there at 6:30 or wait until the boss goes before they go. And that's such a toxic culture, because women do the majority of housework, they do the majority of childcare. They're the ones that are feeling the pinch from this, and that doesn't even look at the fact that when women come back from maternity leave, they very often join at a lower level or the same level they were at on a part-time basis. Then they're basically starting back from square one again in the macho corporate culture that means people have to fight to be there, blah blah blah. So there are a number of different things that I think we need to look at within cultures, within corporate cultures, that are not particularly favorable to women.
It's just continuing to feed that, isn't it? And speaking of women in the workplace, what are some things that can be done to help them feel safer in the workplace as well? Because you said, obviously, in society, who feels safer walking home at night, but equally who feels safer, in their own workplace? What can we do about that?
Well, I've got quite a list here. I'll just
I love it. Point one, let's go.
We'll be here for hours. But I think I think acknowledge the importance of life as well as work. That's one of the things for both partners, having decent leave after there's been a baby, after a baby's been born. I think paternity leave in the UK, is it 2 weeks as a standard? I think we need to increase both of them, and we need to increase the pay for both of them, because those bonding and those kind of habit forms, those habits that form within the household are really important in the early days of having a child. Stop the long hours culture. Things like having lit car parks, safety in car parks.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Airwells. I saw I follow a lot of really good kind of corporate culture and feminist Instagram pages, and there was one that was shared the other day, and a woman was in the lift, and a neighbor got in and goes, "Oh, how come you're taking the lift instead of the stairs?" And she said, "Well, because there's CCTV in the lift." And it was something that the man had never thought of. He was thinking she's being lazy going to the 3rd floor when she could walk up the stairs. He's never even thought about the fact that there are no CCTV cameras on the stairs in their apartment block. So, this kind of thing. So making sure people feel safe, making sure there are appropriate kind of bathroom changing and kind of those kind of facilities for women and men. And for people that have kind of alternative gender identities, those kind of facilities, because again, that can be uncomfortable for people, for women. Balanced teams, not having overweights in one kind of you look at schools, you look at primary schools, the majority of teachers are women. Very often, there's a head that's a man, or the kind of SLT are men. So let's kind of balance up the teams as well. Let's actually have quotas that are meaningful. Let's make that work, because we've got the 30 by 30 is the kind of initiative to get 30% of boards to be women by 2030. That's not enough. That's still not equal. It's still only a third. It's not even a third. So let's kind of start pushing towards some actual quotas that are meaningful. IT policies for social media use, for social media abuse. People will use work equipment to send dick pics and inappropriate content. Sorry, you might want to bleep that out. But
it's true though.
Also, work events. Let's not put people in compromising positions by putting them away, sending them away for time to hotels, for conferences in Las Vegas and stuff like that. Don't hold conferences in places like Las Vegas, where the whole place is shrouded in what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. No, let's stop that kind of bro code silence thing that you. Why would you put a conference in Las Vegas?
It doesn't scream professional, does it?
No, it doesn't scream tasteful, and it also doesn't scream equality and safety. There's so many. Also, proper reporting system. So if something inappropriate happens, if someone is assaulted, if someone is sent an inappropriate message, there's a reporting system that is actually going to make a difference. That people are going to be held accountable for the behavior they perpetrate in the, I mean, that sounds wrong, but
and then they feel comfortable to actually report it as well.
Absolutely, that it's not going to affect their future, because so often, I mean, look at the reports into institutional misogyny and racism and things like the fire service and the police force. There was a report came out that I just emailed myself about in the medical profession, sexual assaults in operating theatres, not just in the NHS. So I think we need this almost like not a no tolerance, but a kind of really taking this. Well, it should be no tolerance, but I think we're a long way from step by step. Let's have policies that actually work for everybody, and let's not forget that sexual assault happens within female perpetrators as well as male perpetrators. It also happens in same-sex relationships and same-sex non-relationships. So But let's be honest, the majority of sexual assaults are committed by men, and they're largely committed against women. So I think let's focus on that as our start point, and let's make policies that are meaningful and that are actually kind of given the weight that they deserve. People are investigated, situations are investigated, and are appropriate kind of sanctions are given for those people. And I think it's really important that is seen as something that is taken very, very seriously. And it needs to be not just a corporate mission statement. It needs to be followed up by actions that actually make that through human resources or talent management or whatever your organization calls it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you said before there are lots of different forms of masculinity. How can organizations help provide positive examples of that?
Well, I think that's a really that is a really good question. I mean, it's not just about having posters of men that are nice. You know, we can all have posters of and Marcus Rashford everywhere, but I think we need to show that. So we need equal opportunities that are truly equal. So we actually balance out. You know, not just the fact that this person can spend longer hours here, or this person has spent longer hours here. This person is actually proven to have done better. There was a report in the FT recently that said, here it is, better performing companies with better gender balance. So those companies that have a better gender balance, and this is on return on investment. So not spurious figures that change over time. This is like a 2% improvement on, you know, return on equity ratio. So it's not just about kind of share prices going down. This is over the length of time. This is billions of dollars and billions of pounds worth of benefits through having more equal workforces that actually represent the population and in that locality, but also globally. So you know, values. That we talk about values a lot. Let's have values where it actually matters. So I talk a lot about empathy. I talk about that continuum between empathy and judgment, where we're all being nudged one way or the other. And I think we need to value this idea of empathy. We need to be able to listen to people who are having a hard time, rather than as a manager, how is this going to affect me? How is this going to affect this person, their work, their life? And what can we do to make that better? How can we pull together to support that person that's struggling, regardless of their background, regardless of their role in the organization? So moving more towards empathy, less towards judgment. I think there's a lot said about, you know, EDI training, EDI this, EDI that. It's all wokeness. It's all at the bottom line. We want to take people and their lives and their feelings into work, and we want them to be able to express themselves fully as they are whilst they're doing their work. They shouldn't be worried about sharing what they're really like, what their you know what their lives are like. But likewise, we also need kind of guidelines on what acceptable behavior is, and I think it's really important that they are you know, concurrent with what the aims of the business are. And I think it's very easy to say, well, we sacrifice our people on the altar of profit or on the altar of this. And I think, you know, we need a culture that says, here's our mission statement. That's not just a bolt on that we tell people that we do. Let's make meaningful cultures based on our mission statements, because very often companies that employ these better practices, these practices where people are happier, these practices where people feel safer at work, where they don't feel like they're at risk for putting their hand up and saying, I don't agree with that, those companies outperform other companies. Those ones that kind of embrace diversity and equality in a real sense, rather than just a kind of box sense. I think they're often the ones that succeed more than others. And I can't think of any off my head, but so basically equity helps everybody. That would be my kind of my final statement on this.
Definitely. You're actually working on a book at the moment as well. What Makes a Man? Could you talk a little bit more about that? I know it's still in early stages, so only share what you can. But
it is. I mean, it's based on the work I've been doing for the last. I mean, I've always believed in equality and, dealing, pushing against sexism. My eldest daughter is 30 this year, and my youngest is 23. And from a very early age, I resisted doing things like buying kitchens. I bought toolboxes for them and this kind of stuff. It didn't stop the eldest loving to play cafes and get a little penny on, and but that was her choice. I mean, so I've always been interested in kind of equality and kind of getting rid of stereotypes. Your listeners obviously won't know this, but you might, Kat, that in 2012 my sister she left her husband and kids for a man that she'd met on the internet, and she she was fatally stabbed by my sister Sarah was fatally stabbed by a man that she met and was living with. And ever since then, I've been a passionate advocate for talking about male violence against women and girls, and trying to help men to recognize their role in it, help men to understand why it's so important for us to be allies towards women, and also for us to kind of make lives better for ourselves and for women. So and over the course of the last, that was 2014 when I started talking about it, so that's nearly 10 years now I've been speaking about violence against women and girls. And whenever I do, there's the kind of, not all men, it's not all of us, but we all operate within a society that enables and facilitates the kind of dumbing down of male violence against women and girls. So top and bottom of it is, since the last couple of years, we've been dealing with the kind of huge increase in misogyny, driven by things like the availability of violent, sadistic porn, also with kind of influencers that are talking about traditional based masculinity and what women should do, men should do. The kind of title, What Makes a Man, came to me, and I've been delivering workshops on that. So What Makes a Man is, at the moment, going to be a book for PSHE and RSE teachers, so teachers in schools that deal with personal, social, health, economic, and also relationships and sex ed, to help them to dispel some of the myths, to promote better masculinities, to challenge that kind of idea, to challenge things like feminism's gone too far, or real men do this, real men do that, and stoicism is important. Men shouldn't cry, women shouldn't bawl their eyes out, which is something that I heard recently. A boy said it about 3 times. Yeah, men shouldn't cry and women shouldn't bawl their eyes out. And it was kind of, I was just kind of trying to get him to see that he was saying men shouldn't cry and women shouldn't bawl their eyes out, as a different way he was phrasing the, to his kind of internal thoughts on what men and women should do. So short, that's the long answer. Short answer, I want teachers to be able to kind of help young people to see what equality and equity really means, and that there are ways to be a man that doesn't mean we have to put other people down. So top and bottom of it, that's it.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear about your sister.
Thank you, Kat. Thanks. Sarah and I didn't get on very well, if I'm completely honest, and as adults we took totally different directions. But after going through the court case, me and my wife sat in the Crown Court for 2 whole weeks while this smirking man sat in front of us, saying, his only defense was she'd been on at me all day. That was literally his only defense. And I just thought, after that, I really don't want Sarah's legacy to be that she was this woman that was seen as a nag. I think since then I've spoken to about 30,000 young people about coercive control, which underpins every single abusive relationship, and that domestic abuse and domestic violence and homicide are absolute extremes, and they don't happen to everybody. But domestic abuse doesn't start with a punch in the face. It starts with language. It starts with gaslighting. It starts with all of the unhealthy relationships, and
those things like financial control as well can be a really big thing as well.
I think we should have find my friends on our phone, so I always know safe
where you are,
and this kind of stuff. And it's very, very subtle, and you're made to feel like you're overreacting if you call this stuff out. So I'm really passionate about helping young people to understand what coercive control is and controlling behavior looks like, because it underpins, like I said, it underpins every single abusive relationship. It happens at work. I was bullied at work by 2 different people in 2 different in 2 different organizations. One was a university, now a private company. And why I didn't spot it happen to me the second time, I'll never know. But the first, completely undermining. I took 3 days off when my second daughter was born because I was working for this man who would not recognize anything outside of the business, and everything was my fault. It was that kind of, you know, why have you done this? I never said that, this kind of stuff. And it's pernicious, it's corrosive. So I suppose my main driver for everything used to be helping young people to sort out their futures. It's now helping everybody to understand the pernicious and debilitating and confidence reducing effects of coercive control, helping people to see it, what to do if they come across it.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. Is there any other advice that you want to give our listeners today, just around the topic in general?
Oh,
have I opened a floodgate for you?
I think trust your gut. You know, we hear this a lot. And here's a message that I think absolutely sums up if you're in a relationship that isn't very healthy. If someone likes you, loves you, or respects you, you know. If they don't, you'll be confused. And that kind of describes to me what happens in your gut when you get that feeling. God, that they're a bit. I don't really. Why do they think like that? And why have they said that instead of what I would expect someone to say? And I think that's really what I would say is trust your gut, trust your kind of own kind of guidance system, really. And if someone makes you feel confused or makes you question yourself or your own behavior when you're sure something has happened, then I think it's really, really important that you listen to that and tell your friends, because all abuse and coercive control relies on secrecy.
Yeah, definitely.
So get support. So if you're at school, get your pastoral support. If you're at work, look for helplines, look for those, you know, those adverts that are in the bathrooms for, are you in an unhealthy relationship? Sometimes they are pointed at us. Sometimes they're there for us to see, not just for other people that we don't think it affects. It took me a really long time to realize that I'd been kind of subject to workplace bullying. And as soon as I went to my doctor about it, he went, "Oh, this is really unhealthy." As soon as I went to the union, they said, "This is absolutely out of order. It's clear that this policy has not been followed." And it's a relief that someone actually just goes, yeah, you're not losing it. This is actually helping you. And again, as a man, you think, "Oh, I can't be bullied because I'm a bloke." And again, you know, that's another thing that toxic or kind of dominant
it's very toxic.
It doesn't allow us to see our own fallibility until sometimes. And then, you know, then we talk about, you know, quite often when I'm talking about violence against women and girls, I get, "Well, what about the male suicide rate?" Yeah, it's a real problem. But it's a real problem largely because we are taught not to talk about our feelings and not to accept that difficult stuff happens to men as well. And yeah, we should be able to cope. Well, no, none of us should be able to cope with either being bullied or being, you know, having depression or, you know, feeling lonely. None of us should have to cope with that. So ask for help. That's another thing. Ask for help. The times I've done it, it's been the best thing I've ever done.
Completely.
Trying to
leave
a positive.
No, I think that's really good. So my last thing really was just, where can our listeners best get in touch with you and learn more?
My company is called Innovative Enterprise, so innovativeenterprise.co.uk. It's running along the bottom now. My Twitter and Instagram handles are What Makes a Man. There should be an underscore at the end of that as well.
Sorry.
It's okay.
What makes a man
underscore? Yeah, What Makes a Man. And yeah, that's
right in the show notes.
Probably it. And I'm also, my book is out through Crown House and Independent Thinking, so you can get to me through that as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Bernie. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today.